With the funeral behind us, and now looking to finalize the estate, we started to comb through all of Mom's possessions and sorted out who should get what. It was while going through Mom's possessions I came across the shopping bag with 2 boxes full of letters that she had kept all these years. I was always aware that these letters existed while I grew up, but never gave them much thought, as many young people wouldn't. It wasn't until I started to sort the letters into a chronological order that I realized there was a story here that I was barely aware of. I thought that this is something that my children and grandchildren would love to read someday, as it chronicled a day-to-day life from the late 30s as he was courting my mother and through the war years, in which Dad would describe in detail the daily events without any of the gory details of war, as he did not want to worry Mom. I started to copy the letters to my computer by first scanning them in and enlarging them in order to decipher the writing. Dad's writing was like hen scratches, his grammar and spelling not always correct, and his sentences tended to run on. I corrected the spelling errors and on occasion fixed some grammar, but 99% is exactly as he wrote it. As I began this exercise, many of the old pictures that Mom possessed started to fall into place and now have meaning to me. I have added maps of where Dad lived and ventured in northern Ontario, as well as his map he used in Holland during the war. There are expressions and terminology and even the attitudes of the day mentioned in the letters. You need to put things into context of the day, such as politics and prejudice, as what was common and acceptable then would not be appropriate today. As I mentioned, Dad's writing was bad and some words I could not decipher, and so would put down what I thought the letters may be and highlighted them in red. That way when I read the letters again, the word would possibly pop out at me and I would correct it. If I got the word wrong, it could change the whole meaning of the sentence, so I would rather be cautious than make a mistake. Some words I could never figure out, and so I did my best to rearrange the sentence as long as I was sure not to change the meaning intended. There are also a few letters from Roger to his mom and dad, Uncle Gil to Roger, Aunt Joyce to Marg, Uncle Al to Marg and Roger, and Uncle Al to my grandmother Boyer. These letters fill in the story, and so I have included them. Dad's letters are his personal thoughts, and they were written at a time when he was young and totally in love, so you will see this reflected in all letters. At first my dad refers to Mom as Marg, but as the relationship grew, he would just call her Margie, and so that is why I call this journal Letters to Margie. His intentions for these letters, I'm sure, were not to have them put into a format like this for myself or anybody else to read, let alone even be saved. But they were saved, and now here they are. I have decided to divide the letters up into 4 sections of his life. The first part being the initial meeting of Mom and Dad right up until they are married, and I call that the early years. Part 2 is when Dad joins the army and continues with his Canadian training right up until he departs to England. Part 3 continues with his training in England and being prepared for active duty. Part 4 starts from his landing in France and continues until the war is over and Dad leaves to return to Canada. There was a total of 496 letters in my original document, and it made for a word count of 225K, which is way too long for a publication today. For this audio version, I have left it complete, so it does make for a long audiobook. My family also has all the letters from my uncles and aunts sent back to my grandparents, but that history is for another day. To start part 1, the early years, I will now let my dad tell the story.